Hi, this is Brian Courtney. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Short Bus Debate Club. Got Darren Jolly here with me.
Hi.
Just real quick, I wanted to cover something because I felt kind of bad that I left him out, and it wasn't on purpose. But um, last time we were talking about voting, and we talked about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and SNCC and all of these people that made sacrifices, but I didn't talk about women and the suffrage movement. And they fought long and hard to get voting rights here in the United States. I think from like 1880 or 1870 until 1920.
Yeah, 1919 and the constitutional amendment went through in 1920.
Yeah, it's a long time to be fighting for something like that, and those those rights are still being squandered as far as I'm concerned. But I wanted to kind of cover that as I don't know, a correction of sorts, because we do have some others just to mention, because we didn't mention them last time. So I'll let Darren do that. But thanks for joining us, and we'll get into the topic of, well, strangely enough, sacrifice here in a minute.
So quickly, with regards to the voting, the numbers that were from the 2020 census, when Brian, the percentages are correct. It is 51% for the 18 to 24s. But when he said the 18,000 numbers, the way that the Census Bureau posts those numbers is in thousands of the numbers. So it's 18,000 thousands, which is 18 million. And then the total, of course, that are available to register is twice that, which means that you got 18 million, but 36 million could be participating and are not participating. Quickly, when we were talking about the Reform Party, even though Ross Perot pulled himself out of those elections, he did get a ton of popular vote. He got 18.9% in 92. He got 8.4% in 96. And when they put Pat Buchanan in, he got about 450,000, which ended up being a little bit less than 1%. And then quickly, regarding the Roe v. Wade, I was using a term. I said that there were policies that were being constructed. I just want to be clear that there was nothing legislative that was being constructed in those spaces. It was just interpretations that developed out of the 14th Amendment, which allowed for it's the difference between what they call enumerated rights and implicit rights.
Well, it was also, and we talked about it by precedent, because the Supreme Court said this. So it ended up being, again, not legislative, but by them saying, this is the way it is. So
there's no doubt that the Dobbs ruling opens up a huge can of worms with regards to what can be attacked from the state level in relation to those precedents and those implicit rights, or non-enumerated rights are.
But lots of laws can be created by precedent. So, I mean, it was a law by precedent, even though it wasn't in the Constitution.
I get it. I just wanted, like, in terms, like, sometimes, they might come after me for saying policy, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's like that whole activist sports stuff. I mean, of course, when you're making an interpretation, you are constructing a concrete legal space, which is essentially creating a policy. But again, we're not lawyers, so I just didn't want, anybody coming at me over that policy comment. So.
You didn't want the Short Bus Debate Club phone number to be lit up with people going, it wasn't policy.
What would constitute the Short Bus Debate Club phone being lit up? How many phone calls would we have to receive at that point in time?
I don't know, 5?
5, yeah.
4?
I think 3 was where I was at, but I'll go 5. 5's fine. So.
2? 1?
Okay.
Blast off.
So what are we talking about today then?
So I think because of the fact that we didn't really, go into anything really in depth, because we were just kind of talking about voting and the fact that people didn't take advantage of it. But I think sacrifice is a good topic because, like I said, women sacrificed lots of people in history have sacrificed for one thing or another. And it's not just voting. I mean, it's a lot of the things that we take for granted these days. Freedom of speech, which is, I don't know if I want to call it freedom of speech anymore, but freedom of speech is definitely something that I think is taken for granted. Freedom to assemble, things like that give us these outlets to where we could tell people they're not doing their jobs correctly, to where we could hold them more accountable. And instead we just sit around on our fat asses and, watch football, which is fine. But I think we should watch football while we're trying to hold these people accountable one way or another. So sacrifice is the topic, I think.
So, yeah, I mean, you can start in 8 million different spaces. I mean, you brought up the women's suffrage, and like you had suggested, at least in terms of time period, that it was rooted in an outgrowth of what had happened in the wake of the Civil War. And it's odd how throughout you have a country that identifies itself as a certain political disposition, but at the beginning of those, at the inception of those spaces, there were so many individuals that were rooted in those social spaces that were invisibilized. I mean, the 3/5 clause in the Constitution with regards to slaves, women. Yeah, I mean, you had to be essentially a
WASP,
a propertied white, a white landowner, essentially, at the beginning to even have to even count. So,
well, I mean, really, if you think about it, it's not too far off these days. It's just slightly better. But if you were a propertied landowner back then, you knew how to read, you knew how to write, and you had money. So I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but again, it's really about rich and poor. It's a socioeconomic thing, and it probably has been throughout time. But yeah, the 3/5 clause and the woman's right to vote, I think that they weren't necessarily the same thing. They definitely weren't the same thing, but they were tied together closely. I mean, Frederick Douglass helped with women's suffrage. And they finally got it. Like I said, they worked long and hard to get the right to vote. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you had a line of thinking that you were trying to go down.
Carry on, my good man.
But those aren't the only sacrifices that I really wanted to talk about. I mean, because there are lots of people throughout the history of just our country that have sacrificed one way or another to get things, I don't know, do you want to call it more civilized?
I don't hate that. I mean, one of the things that I fight with myself, and this is really because of a friend of ours named Janae. She wrote me these letters back in 2016 and 2017 where she talked about the concept of progress. When I think about historical movement, that's one word that tends to be sort of loaded inside of these discussions. But I'm just, I'm always confused or concerned, particularly based on the letters that she sent, whether or not progress is actually something that happens. But at the bottom of all of these things that we're sort of hoping and believing is, as more people have access, as more different genders, different individuals, people that have essentially been invisibilized by the power structures have access, then maybe maybe we do have. I mean, I don't hate the word civilized. civilized, except for the fact that it ties to kind of some kinds of modern thinking in relation to the concepts of progress that have their own loaded problems. But for right now, I'll go with civilized.
Well, I mean, even the Greeks and Romans talked about becoming more civilized or more civil,
And their definitions were real good.
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, at the time, when you're talking about not having any power or any water that runs, when a dispute may or may not be settled with a fucking knife or a sword, I think that they probably used it pretty well back then.
I mean, because I don't want to go off on too heavy of a thing, because we're, this is more about sacrifice and struggle and those types of things. Like, to be civilized in ancient Greece meant to be Greek, and essentially a Greek landowner, right? Like, if you were not Greek, then you were a barbarian, and that's the same thing for Romans. Like, if you were not a part of the Roman Empire, like when they conquered the Germanic tribes and they pulled them in, then they suddenly had the potential to be, enlightened and civilized and all.
Well, no, because I mean, they owned slaves, and even if you weren't a slave, you were a freeman, or a pleb. But if you weren't in the upper echelon, if you weren't in the Senate, or at least a landowner, then you didn't really amount to anything. So again, we're not too fucking far off from back then. But I use the word civilized because, well, when I was thinking about sacrifice, initially, I was thinking about all of these women that fought for 60 fucking years to get the right to vote. All of the black people that fought to get the right to vote. But just now when we were talking, I thought about, was his name Will Miranda, who really just ended up sacrificing because of the fact that he was arrested and they didn't read him
into the Miranda rights.
Right, there were no rights back then. So he sacrificed something to where he ended up getting a law named after him. And I'm not sure. I think he was just a murderer or a rapist or something who probably ended up getting off.
Just a murderer or a rapist. Got to make sure that you hear that.
Well, no, I want to make sure to not say that he was some kind of fucking hero who sacrificed anything.
A liberator, yeah.
It's these little things that, again, progress probably isn't the right word. I don't know if civilized is, because even though they're supposed to read us our rights, our Miranda rights when we get arrested, I haven't been read my fucking rights once, ever, when I was arrested.
Yeah, how many times have you been? Sorry, that was a dick move. Sorry.
Not once. So I think that they don't even really pay attention to that anymore, and that's where our civil liberties are going down the toilet, and that's why I want, while we still have these powers available to us, the freedom of speech, the right to assemble, even freedom of religion at this point, I think we still have these outlets available to us because of these sacrifices people have made in the past, and I think that we have to utilize them. I think that, again, Martin Luther King, I think he would be pissed if he saw the way that we are just doing nothing.
Let's go with him for just a second, just for a moment. So at the end of his, like at the beginning, his movements were primarily rooted in civil rights. Him, SCLC, like you said, SNCC last time, the marches that were going on down there. I mean, it was for access, but towards the end of his life, to quote old Zach De La Rocha, when he was down in Memphis for that janitor strike, He turned the power to the have-nots, and then came the shot. If you listen to a lot of the speeches that he had at the end of his life, what he was struggling for, and in terms of like when I look at him as an individual, and I don't dissociate him from any from the Black Panthers, from Malcolm X. I just sort of identify them as
more
people
sacrifice
that were located in specific regional spaces that demanded different types of responses to. I mean, it was very different in San Francisco than it was in the South. It was very different in Harlem than it was in either one of those other places. So they had to sort of utilize different strategies. But the point is that, like, if I think about sacrifice and focusing just on like political rights or civil liberties, it just seems like at the end of King's life, he was self-identified socialist, and he became hypercritical of capitalism because of the way that he didn't feel that poor people had access not just to political spaces, but the things that you need to be able to reproduce your life every day that afford you a certain amount of leisure so that you can spend time going out and going to some sort of like civil action, something where you go into your community and you talk about the problems that are happening from day to day, because you actually have the energy to do it, because you didn't just work a 14-hour day as a janitor scrubbing floors, or being a maid in a house, or I just I have to see the concept of sacrifice, particularly when it comes to those people, is extending beyond just political access, voting access, things like that. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that we have made some changes from back then. Whether you're a janitor or a coal miner or somebody working in a textile mill, things are different. Now there are certain mandated things that have to happen if you work so many hours. With regard to pay. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't make you work that many hours and stay in the mine all day to where you don't want to do anything when you get off of work. But there are people in the middle class that are working 40 or 60 hours a week that don't do anything. And when I talk about these rights, I'm not saying, that they need to go to all of the rallies or any rallies, or that they need to write 100 letters a day or do anything like that. But, some action, in my opinion, is better than no action at all. And people disagree with me and tell me that I'm fucking crazy, and I am, no doubt. But these rights are being slowly taken away, and they're taking them away slowly, because if they take them away all at once, we'll notice. But if they put up a camera here and a camera there, and they say that we can't say this, and we can't listen to this after this time, and we can't do this, and you have to have a license to do that or a permit to do that. If they do it that way, then one day we just wake up and we don't have those rights anymore. And that is kind of the way that they're doing it. So that sacrifice, just stand up and yell if you're fucking pissed at something. Call your congressman, call the House of Representatives, let your neighbor know. You don't have to take a lot of action, take some.
So I'm gonna so like I can't divide. Part of the reason why I brought up what happened at the end of Martin Luther King's life is because and you could another way of people that sacrificed, at the early part of the 20th century were people that were in, the sweatshops, that, the jungle. And people that organized.
Just to clarify, you mean the jungle?
Yes, Upton Sinclair. Yes, that's what I'm.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking about an actual jungle.
Yeah, no,
so you meant the
welcome.
slaughterhouses in Chicago?
Yeah, we are not welcoming to the jungle, baby. So, but I mean, ton of people died during that time period to create the position for organized labor to emerge, and it's not just civil liberties that are being done away with. I mean, when you started to see the changing of industry, and this is something we kind of touched about a little bit in the last segment, but when industry started to open up and it went to Mexico, when it went to Southeast Asia, the organized labor got decimated, right? So I mean, I don't think the reason why I pair them these needs for financial or for economic power is that I think that civil rights, like, to be meaningful, it has to be teamed with these other spaces. Otherwise, it's just sort of like mental masturbation a lot of the times. Like, you're doing it. I mean, having said that, like, what Julian Assange did when he published all the things that he published that got him into so much trouble, to land him in the Ecuador embassy for 7 years, and essentially been. I mean, it's odd because you're talking about a civil liberties issue where a guy has been charged with a U.S. crime that should only, the Espionage Act, which should only be applied to U.S. citizens. The guy is an Australian citizen who had residency in Sweden, if I'm not incorrect, and he has no responsibility to the U.S. state, but because of the way that he published all the things that happened in Iraq too, that were so, I mean, the people that were bombed in the street, the reporters and the Iraqi civilians on that video, I can't remember what it was called, but just devastating. But so the right got pissed off on that, and then he published all the shit with regards to the Podesta emails going into the 2016 election. So then the left got pissed. So nobody wants to honor the concept of civil liberties for this individual who's essentially just practicing the right to freedom of press at that point in time, and he's not even a U.S. citizen, and he's essentially gonna. I mean, so these things are drying up. I mean, there's no doubt about it, but it's in a weird way where, like, it's not just, you can't think about the United States as a container where it's just the citizens here that are being pounded. I mean, if somebody's outside of it and we get pissed off at them, we do something like we're doing to him, which is just supremely odd. Like,
it's kind of funny because we have, I'm going to call it an act. It's not really an act, but we have the whistleblower, and they say that they encourage you to blow the whistle if you see something wrong, whether it's government spending or somebody's using information in a way that they're not supposed to, or whatever. We're supposed to blow the whistle, and there are rewards that are given depending on what the outcome is of your whistleblowing. But I wouldn't want to blow the whistle because of what happened to Julian Assange.
Or Chelsea Manning or any number of other people.
There's no way that I would blow the whistle, because then you just end up on another fucking report somewhere, another watch list where you're trouble, for whatever group that you blew the whistle on, or any group, because of the fact that you blew the whistle on one. And believe me, I'm not one of those guys that is a tattletale. I don't think that you should do that, but
we grew up in an environment that demanded certain sensibilities that you don't generally tell on people. That's just life. But that's different than when you're talking about, the things that Assange and Manning were talking about when they came forward.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, I consider myself to be a conservative when it comes to fiscal situations, But when I say that, I'm talking about government spending, not my own wallet, because, I don't have any savings. I spend money like crazy, but it's my fucking money. When they spend taxpayer money and spend $600 on an ashtray and $1,200 on a wrench, that's stupid. And I'm conservative when it comes to government spending. I'm also a liberal when it comes to rights. People should be able to do whatever the fuck they want whenever they want. We're all grown-ups, and if we have kids, we're the ones that should take care of our kids, not the government. And again, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I'm just saying that those are things that you could blow a whistle on. Government spending, things that are going out of control. And that's a way that you could hold these people accountable. So if you are not a believer in snitches get stitches, then blow a whistle on a motherfucker if you know that they're doing something wrong.
Well, and honestly, I think that's a total apples and oranges thing. Like inside of the government, when you have, particularly with the military, when they're doing some really, really questionable shit, sometimes and like in the wake of 9/11, with the advent of the Homeland Security and Patriot Act, we all knew in that moment. I mean, if you really were honest with yourself, you all knew what was happening. You knew that there were people that were being tortured that didn't belong being tortured. There were a lot of things that were happening that were incredibly questionable, and to not come forward in that moment, I think that's quite a bit different than the old snitches get stitches kind of thing. I mean, that's the people who utilize those arguments as a way of perpetrating a position to protect their own long-term oil investments. Those people need to get narked on. They need to get pounded, for forever. So forever.
Yeah, and I don't know where we kind of took that side road.
Sacrifice.
And I don't know necessarily how to circle back around to the sacrifice thing. I know
we were talking about Julian Assange.
Well, we were talking about the withering of our rights slowly, as opposed to all at once, and you used Julian as an example of that.
Which was a big ass sacrifice. I mean, he'll probably, even if he gets out of jail tomorrow, he will never be mentally okay, ever. Even if he doesn't die, he's going to be fucked in his head for the rest of his life. I can't imagine what it's like being stuck in a room for 7 years, then be put in a British prison for 4 years, and having to think about being extradited to the United States every day and knowing exactly what's going to happen the second that you get here, where you get Epstein's, like you just get disappeared 5 seconds after you get here. Because don't be confused. They might hold him here forever because of the fact that he's so high profile. But the more probable outcome would be that they would send an incredible message to anyone inside of the journalistic communities and inside of the spaces where they have the ability to leak that information to the journalistic communities so that everybody knows clearly what's going to happen, the consequences are. Sorry.
Well, no, in theory, though, I mean, if they really wanted to disappear him, they could disappear him. They have that power to do that, regardless of what country or what prison he's in.
Of course.
They're good at blackbagging people. Lots and lots of people have disappeared or died mysteriously.
He would be an odd, high-profile one to do it because of the way that people look at him with regards to. I mean, because the Obama administration, they wouldn't put the charges on. It wasn't until Trump came in that they actually put the charges on him, and that of course Biden is continuing on with that legal the same persecutory position. So. But the reason why Obama did it, he came out and said clearly, he says, if we do this, then anybody, we could literally have half the New York Times going to jail tomorrow, I mean, so I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, again, I mean, what was his name? The dude that they used the umbrella to kill him. He was a Russian.
I saw this, yes.
They used that little teeny fucking thing that they put in the calf of his leg.
That's where the whole black umbrella, like conspiracy stuff grew out of, right?
I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe.
It's hilarious.
Hilarious. Yeah, so we can kill a guy with the tip of an umbrella, and they didn't know how he died or why he died for a really long fucking time. So getting rid of any one person at any time is not something that the United States would be afraid to do.
But there's a difference between doing it to Julian Assange and doing it to other people.
Yeah, the reason I don't know his name is because it happened fucking 80 years ago or longer.
And you think that he was a household name, in the 40s?
He was then, I think.
I'm just gonna say that I'm a healthy skeptic right now, at the very least. Okay, so Brian's gonna see if he can find that, and we're gonna continue to meditate on the concept of sacrifice.
But either way, I mean, they can definitely disappear people. And now they have better shit. Okay, maybe not. His name was, and he was a Bulgarian writer. His name was Georgy Markov.
So what was the year?
1978.
Okay. 2 years before I was born. Or after I was born. Oh, I had one other correction. I said I was 47 in the last episode. I don't know how I said that. I'm 46.
Math is hard.
Hard.
Yeah, so I mean, they can definitely kill people and have killed people. So it's
and will continue to kill people.
Not a real big deal.
I just used Epstein as a verb, right? I mean, and that's pretty present. I'm surprised they didn't kill his female counterpart, to be perfectly honest with you. But
so I don't know. We've been talking for 30 minutes, and I know we said that the topic was sacrifice, and I think we really did lay into the sacrifice thing hard, but I started talking about, doing something with your civil liberties, voting, whatever, because of the sacrifices people have made in the past, and utilize these things before they go away. I don't know. I mean, I can think of a bunch of people that have done sacrifices either here or globally, for one thing or another. I mean, we've got streets named after them.
Nelson Mandela, for sure.
There's an entire song called Nelson Mandela. So historically, these people have done a lot of things. I'm not a big union guy, but Darren talked about the unions. Personally, I think these days unions are just kind of out for themselves, not their members. I think that they want to get their dues weekly because, depending on the size of the union, the president wants to make a shitload of money and could care less what is happening with the miner or the
American postal worker.
The guy the woman who was stitching stuff together for whatever. And honestly, most manufacturing is in Mexico, Laos, Taiwan, Bangladesh,
Vietnam,
somewhere else, because unions made things too expensive for manufacturing here. And that goes for auto manufacturing too. The only reason that the cars that are made here is because they managed to talk the contract down, or they built the factory and it's not union. I know Tennessee is a big state where they make a lot of cars now. A lot of the states down south where they were having, call it, economic issues, might be doing better now that manufacturing has come back in, and now maybe
that
middle class can be rebuilt. I don't know. We'll see what happens in 20 years.
I'm skeptical about that too. Just for the record.
Believe me, I'm skeptical. I'm just telling you that they're there now.
Having said that, though, I agree with your point about unions right now. Now that it's moved to it like a strict, like broken down by industry or broken down by, like at the post office, we have 4 different unions. We don't work together. If you're going to effectively try to come up against transnational capital, the next sacrifice that people are going to have to make is understanding the way that system's reproducing itself and quit. Again, and this, I know I come at you a lot, but I do agree with your divide and conquer argument. Obviously, like if you don't stand together, transnational capital, they don't care where you come from. They just, as long as you speak their language and you're helping them make more money, then they're gonna subscribe to your position. So as a postal worker who is a member of a union, I have become increasingly skeptical of the way that the unions exist presently as well.
Yeah, maybe that's what we should talk about now. I mean, because we know, and hopefully our listeners know who has made sacrifices for them in the past, but maybe we can talk about how we can make sacrifices for the future. And they don't have to be big sacrifices. I'm not talking about losing a fucking digit or losing your life. But, what are some of the things that you might do to help keep a hold of what it is you've got and or change things to see what you want?
Well, personally, I might participate in a podcast and have some conversations about where it is that we're at, where we've been, and where we might be going, and talk about things that are generally speaking uncomfortable. Because the fact of the matter is, if you do that, you're gonna subject yourself to certain kinds of scrutiny. That is a sacrifice that's out there. That there are always potential consequences for people that do things like this. So, of course, people have to start listening first. So.
Well, and that was kind of the freedom of speech thing that I was talking about. There are little things that people can do just to yell. And I'm right there with you. That's one of the reasons that I thought that the podcast would be a really neat idea.
Neat.
But I don't know. Well, I know there's a lot of other stuff I could be doing. I kind of relaxed from writing everybody letters and telling them what I thought that they should do. But
it's funny when you do that, you get that like totally ridiculous scripted response. I mean.
Oh no, it's all out of a can. It is all out of a can because, everybody fucking loved Sanders. Everybody. Oh, Sanders is great. Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, how the fuck is he planning on doing any of these things? Any of these outlandish things that he's talking about doing? How is he going to do it? Because anybody can stand on a stump and say, well, I'm going to get rid of the fucking lower class, or I'm going to give everyone $1.5 million. And you're going to get some sort of response, and people are going to be impressed. And I'm not saying Sanders said any of that stuff.
I love your use of hyperbole, just for the record.
But anybody could stand on a stump and say that. So I actually put a letter together, and I said, look, how are you going to do this and this and this? And all I got back was a letter that said, thank you for your support. I didn't support the motherfucker. I don't know where they got that in my letter.
I mean, obviously your point is you can't put a healthcare for all bill into place unless you have. I mean, there are a ton of things you have to have Congress on your side for. But there are definitely things he could have done through executive order. He could have decriminalized drugs. He could have done that through executive order. He could have wiped student debt away through an executive order. There were things that he could have done. But having said that, I get your bigger point there. I mean, it becomes kind of obnoxious when a person's standing there and sort of like making all these establishing these rhetorical positions that play into your emotions. Of course, yeah, these are all things that we want. That sure would benefit me, but you have to. There has to be sort of a practical space. that's why I get more critical of just thinking about voting, because I mean, like, yeah, we're the gridlock world that we're in. But again, that's I got to digress back to sacrifice and whatnot.
Well, no, and I understand your point, and maybe that's a fucking interesting thing too, is these guys, whether we're talking about Sanders or Trump or Obama or Romney or Clinton or whoever, and that goes for Hillary and Bill, maybe they had other ideas. Okay, and I know for sure Romney did, because when he ran for president the first time, he said one thing. And when he ran the second time, he said something entirely different. And so these guys are sacrificing things that I think are important to them in order to either garner support from whatever group, the DNC or the GOP, or maybe even to get more votes from the public at large. And I don't know if that's right, because just to say something in order to get a vote or support from your group, if it is actually going against what it is you believe, then I'm not sure that that's the right type of sacrifice that we're talking about.
But how do you even? I mean, like I get what you're saying, but like I don't even know, like, if I could actually strip all the bullshit off of Romney and like really understand what went on in that dude's head. I mean, the only thing you can do, kind of like we were talking about last time, you can look at his policy positions over the course of time, because generally speaking, if he's writing something and if he gets it in the law, those are things that he actually supports. You see who it is that's funneling money to him. You see what it is that he constructs. You see what it is that he does. But I'm not certain that, other than just looking out for himself and looking out for a specific demographic, I don't think that Romney believes in anything.
Well, again,
least of all the Mormon religion.
When we look at who's funneling money to these people, I mean, the big money players funnel to both. I mean, period.
Yes.
They give money to Obama. They give money to Trump. They give money to Clinton and Bush. They give money to both because you want to hedge your bets. And what difference?
They didn't DeSantis, though. They didn't
$200,000.
Just started with that. He didn't take any of that money. So.
Oh, well, good for him.
Well, I think that's an important thing to consider, though, right? I mean, if you're saying that a person's going to sacrifice certain things as a politician to try to draw people into their space, if a person cuts off a certain financial space, then at least, like I'm saying, I don't know, even if I strip them down, I can't tell who they are. But I think generally speaking, if you talk to Bernie Sanders, what was unique about him, even though he didn't have a real practical plan forward, was that he was who he said he was.
Well, so you're saying he didn't take super PAC money? Or are you saying he didn't take money?
He didn't take any corporate money at all. Any corporate money. That's well documented. Okay. I'll stand by that for.
No, that's fine. I'm not arguing with you. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, he took money only from private citizens.
Okay. That's good to know.
You have an incredibly skeptical look on your face. I mean, but you get my point. Like,
no, I am skeptical of the whole thing. I mean, I find it hard to believe because you need money to run a race.
Okay, be skeptical all you want. I mean, but if you find out that I'm wrong, which you're not going to do, then we can do it. We can do that. No,
I'm not even going to look because I trust you. I believe you.
But if I'm wrong, I'd rather you tell me. Honestly, if I'm wrong, I'd rather you tell me. I mean, if you find something, I'd rather you tell me. But he like that was part of his platform is that I don't take any corporate money.
Right.
But there's a different. Okay, I don't want to. I would rather stick to the subject, right? But I do think that no matter what, the way that he conducted himself in relation to his financial positions was quite a bit more genuine than those other hacks. like I said, I agree with your critique of his like whatever his strategic road forward would have been. Of course, like he didn't have anywhere near and even if he got the congressional position to flow in the direction he wanted it to, some motherfucker would have come and taken it from the Supreme Court. If you have a conservative court, they're going to strike the shit down. I mean, you have three branches of government. You have to work with them all to make shit happen. That's the way shit works.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Works-ish. We know there's some issues.
Absolutely. So definitely with regard to politics and the way that we started this whole thing, there are good sacrifices and bad sacrifices. As far as I'm concerned, any sacrifice that can be made that puts us in a better place is a good sacrifice.
Okay, define that. What's a better place?
Well, and see, that's part of the problem, is that better place is going to be different for Mitt Romney than it is for me.
That's why I like you.
Personally, for me, a better place is a place where we are able to do what it is that we want to do with regard to education or work without, well, that's kind of a cheesy answer. Okay, so a better place is where we live in a place where you don't have to work 3 jobs to barely pay your rent, and you can afford to live and eat, still having some, free time without breaking your fucking back. I think at least that's a start. Things, and you can say that it's inflation, you can say that it's cost of living increases, it's all of these other things. People would say that it's capitalism, but it's not capitalism, because if you put a fucking glove on the invisible hand, then it's no longer capitalism. It's this weird fucking manipulation.
If you put a glove on the invisible hand, then it's Michael Jackson.
So I would like us to be able to live and not have to struggle as much as we do, because a house is $1.2 million when in all actuality it's worth a third of that. And the only, well, I don't want to get into housing and shit right now and cost of living, but
especially since value is not objective anyway. So
it's a different. Anyway, I just don't want everybody to struggle as much as they do. I would like to be able to level the playing field to some degree.
In total, I mean, it's everybody participating in that space. I mean, to bring it back to the concept of sacrifice, obviously we can go down that, what is good, that's a different rabbit hole that we could go down forever. But if everybody has access to these things, if it's available, if a person can, the whole 8 hours of work, 8 hours of pay, you go, you do this, it provides you with the opportunity, everybody the opportunity to have a generally speaking decent life, where you can imagine some sort of leisure time on the side, to where you can have a family life. Yeah, these are generally speaking things that I can get on board with. But I think probably for that to happen, there's going to have to be a lot more sacrifice that's going to have to go on.
Fucking A. And again, I'm too old and too fat to fight anymore, so hopefully you younger people listen and take heed in what I'm saying.
Take heed.
Take heed. You feel like wrapping this up, or you want to keep going?
I think we're pretty much at the end of this one. So.
All right, guys. Once again, gals, guys, people.
Non-binary, yeah. They, as it were, as it is,
they,
as it shall be.
Them.
Yep, sensitivity.
Yeah, that was the Short Bus Debate Club. I'm Brian Courtney.
I'm Darren Jolly. 720-334-ROLL.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.